عزیزم اولا که خب جناب آقای رئیس جمهور رو میبینم که خیلی بهشون ارادت دارم، خیلی دوستشون دارم.
چرا؟
همیشه از ایران طوری دفاع میکنن که منم به خودم این جرأت میدم که از ایران دفاع کنم. من اینجا نویسنده هستم.
Okay, Jonathan, I want to change gears here. I'd like to, and I'm thinking about the paper that you wrote, your recent paper on Iran. Let's talk about how these, if we call it a revolution or revolt or awakening or spring or whatever we want to collectively call it, what's happening in North Africa, how is it going to affect Iran? On the ground, on the ground.
Well, that's a difficult one to say. I think Iran found a formula for crushing the opposition in 2009 after the fraudulent elections, allegedly fraudulent elections, where Ahmadinejad allegedly won 65% of the vote, and then you had a mass outpouring of people in the cities of Tehran, but ultimately through a combination of brute force. Well, in any event, what happened in North Africa is really quite different. They may have learned some Twitter techniques from the Iranian Revolution, but what happened in Iran, what happened in Tunisia and Egypt were fundamentally
Jonathan, those Twitter techniques were traced back to Israel, incidentally.
Well,
the Twitter was
sorry,
traced back to Israel. It was not Iranian.
Look.
If I could make a point.
Let
me just say one thing.
I'm trying. Wait a minute. I didn't finish my point. I mean, you're so obsessed with America and with Israel. I'm trying to say that what the Arab Spring is about is it's about the lack of governance. It's about the lack of personal freedom. It's about a lot of things that the Tunisian and the Egyptian people felt. So I wouldn't say that it was impacted by Iran. However, I would say that the problems that the people of Tunisia and Egypt are suffering from are not different from the problems that people in Iran are suffering from.
Okay, Professor Morandi, I want you to go ahead. Go ahead, jump in, go.
Well, first of all, very quickly, in Iran, I didn't vote for Mr. Ahmadinejad. I'm not a fan of Mr. Ahmadinejad, but he won the elections legitimately. There was absolutely no fraud. The polls carried out by Americans showed it. The polls carried out by Iranians showed it. And even Mousavi's representative in the Ministry of the Interior, who had 40,000 volunteers, said specifically 5 days after the election that there was no fraud. But regardless of Iran, what is happening? It's North Africa. The issue of good governance is very important. I agree with you completely on that, and the issue of corruption and dignity. But also, I think what is very important, regardless of who is managing these revolutions and what direction it is taking, the people of the region are very angry towards their leaders for blindly supporting the United States and aiding the United States in its support for apartheid policies in Palestine. The people of the region dislike Israel immensely, not because they are Jewish, but because there is a Zionist ideology that dominates the land, and the people of Palestine are treated as dirt. They're not treated as human beings. And that is very central to how people in this region feel.
Soraya, you wanted to chime in on that?
I do agree with Professor Morandi 100%. I also want to point out that, yes, Iran does deal with protests, but also understand that the support for the regime in Iran comes from the people. Unlike the Egyptian scenario or Tunisia, where it was the United States and Israel that supported those countries. So even if there is an uprising in Iran, the majority of the people do support the regime and the president, and it's just a show of numbers.
Okay, Jonathan, if I can go back to you in London, of course, at the center of American Forum. Go right ahead.
I'm thunderstruck by this whole analysis, but I don't know where to begin. I think it's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. The Iranian people do not support. Ahmadinejad. That's utter nonsense. And the human rights violations. Soraya,
no.
Human rights. Wait, excuse me, Soraya. I'm speaking now. You listen.
Yes.
Soraya, human rights violations. Okay. Compare tanks in Syria shooting unarmed civilians. Compare what the Basiji did to poor Neda in Tehran. Compare that to whatever you think the Israelis are doing to Palestinians.
Okay. Well, does anybody want?
You guys are spewing propaganda. This is the Tehran propaganda show we're on. Wonderful.
Jonathan, The United
put up with
States and
lies.
the West defeated.
Tim Marshall, when Osama bin Laden, there was a caption last week on Sky News, Osama bin Laden says there will not be peace in Palestine until the rights of Palestinians are there. They interrupted Tim Marshall, who was watching the massacre in Homs of Syrian, supported by Iran, by the way, of Syrian tanks. And Tim Marshall said, come off it. Everybody I talked to, from Benghazi to Cairo, to Tunisia, and now here in Homs, says we reject the big lie that says it's Israel's fault.
All right, I'm going to give Professor Morandi the last word.
Wait a minute. Tim Marshall explained. This has been used by the leaders of these countries to deny their people freedom. That's what the people want.
All right, I'm sorry. We've run out of time, folks. We've run out of time. Run out of time. Thank you for this very spirited debate. Many thanks to my guests today in Tehran, London, and in Irvine. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here in RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.
اولا که خب جناب آقای رئیس جمهور رو میبینم که خیلی بهشون ارادت دارم، خیلی دوستشون دارم.
چرا؟
همیشه از ایران طوری دفاع میکنن که منم به خودم این جرأت میدم که از ایران دفاع کنم. من اینجا نویسنده هستم.